Military experts estimate that Russia spends nearly $1 billion a day to wage war in Ukraine. A significant share of such expenses is the destroyed machinery and expended ammunition used to terrorize Ukraine on a daily basis. Despite an enormous advantage the enemy has in equipment and firepower, Ukrainians are not just successfully repelling the invasion, but also carrying out painful counterattacks on the Russian troops. How is this possible? In today's focus, heavy artillery and how, with your help, it can alter the course of the war. In this war, Ukraine and Russia are using various types of artillery units. Generally speaking, they come in two types: barrel and rocket artillery. The first type are the well-known common artillery systems. They launch a single projectile on long distances to hit a certain target. Long range, high precision, and heavy impact make howitzers, mortars, and cannons capable of striking an enemy even in fortified positions. Such barrel artillery units as Msta, Akatsiya, and Pion predominate along the front lines. The multiple launch rocket systems, or MLRS, are something else. Various types of MLRS are capable of launching more than 10 rockets in a single volley, covering tens of kilometers to reach a target. The most common MLRS systems in the Ukrainian war are Grad, Uragan, and Smerch. Such systems have proved their efficiency against infantry and machinery in open spaces. However, the relatively compact rockets do not contain enough explosives to penetrate thick constructions, which makes them not quite efficient for striking fortified positions. Installing more explosive materials increases the rocket's weight, which makes it another class of weapons. Among such are the infamous cruise missiles that the Russian Federation uses to bombard the civil infrastructure of Ukraine. In such a way, while barrel artillery fires separate projectiles with precision, the MLRS covers larger areas but with a lower impact force of each rocket. So how is the balance between the artillery forces of Ukraine and Russia? Well, it is poor. In the midsummer, Russians have been actively using nearly 1,200 artillery units, while Ukrainian forces operate with around 200, which makes it 6 times fewer. Meanwhile, Ukrainian Commander-in-Chief Valery Zaluzhny has said that during just one summer day, Russia fired nearly 45,000 rounds only in the north of Luhansk and Kharkiv regions. And this does not even include the whole length of the front line. Ukraine's daily return fire consists of 4,000 to 6,000 rounds. So why, considering such an immense advantage, does Putin continually fail to dominate Ukraine completely? Firstly, Ukrainians know how to fight a war. Ukrainian artillerymen are one of the best in the world, getting a proper education in acclaimed artillery schools of Ukraine, in Sumy, Odessa, and Khmelnytsky. It is also worth noting the effective use of software for targeting artillery. The most distinguished of them is called Kropiva, and it was designed by volunteers. Add the experience gained since 2014 and the motivation. Another advantage, skillful use of drones for target identification. Learn more about drones in our first video, Fight for Freedom, The God's View. Apart from drones, motivation, and marksmanship, Ukrainians now also have something essential: Western weapons. Ukraine and Russia have fundamentally different approaches in terms of tactics and strategy. While Russians simply carpet bomb large areas with thousands of projectiles, Ukrainians fire less but with higher precision. NATO artillery systems, which Ukraine so greatly requires, come in handy here. Such systems as American 777 howitzers and M270 MLRS, Polish Krab, French Caesar, Czech Zuzana II, and German Panzerhaubitze 2000, among others, can be found in different spots of Ukrainian front lines, striking the occupant forces. In the past, Ukraine had also used outdated Soviet technologies prevalent among Russian forces. However, most Soviet artillery systems are out of service or not supplied with ammunition. The thing is that heavy Soviet artillery is using 152mm projectiles, while the NATO standard is 155mm. Ukraine has used almost all its reserves of 152mm rounds, and there's nowhere to get more from, as Russia bought almost all available stocks in the world back in March. That is why the majority of the 200 artillery systems striking the invaders of Ukraine are supplied by the Allies. However, this also has its benefits, as the NATO artillery is truly more efficient than the Soviet. A Ukrainian artillery expert helped us figure it all out.
Не можна навіть порівнювати артилерію НАТО і стару в основному розроблену ще у часи СРСР. Це як порівнювати люксове авто знаменитого бренду і якусь малолітражку економ-класу.
Truly, a flagship of the Allied artillery systems is the renowned M142 HIMARS. This multiple rocket launch system is capable of striking targets within a 300 kilometers range, depending on the ammunition type. Remember how the MLRS systems were not efficient against fortified structures? Forget about it. The HIMARS rockets are devastating and precise even against reinforced targets. Ukrainian artillerymen even described cases when a first rocket made a hole in a building so that the second rocket could strike the enemy inside. The Allies have sent more than 10 HIMARS systems to Ukraine, making the opponent feel it almost immediately. Only within a week after the said systems appeared on the front, tens of enemy ammunition warehouses were leveled to the ground. The long-range ammunition allowed Ukraine to strike targets far beyond the front line. One of such strikes on the city of Izum eradicated the headquarters of the 106th Guards Airborne Division of Russia, killing lots of officers of the occupants. Probably the most excellent example of Ukrainian artillery at work is the Russian failed effort to cross the Siversky Donets River near the Bilohorivka village. Crossing this river was a part of the Russian attempt to encircle Ukrainian troops. Russian engineering units have installed the pontoon bridges, allowing a part of the troops and vehicles to cross the river. Suddenly, the heavy shelling of the Ukrainian artillery turned the site into hell on earth. How did it happen? Ukrainian commandment knew that Russians would try to cross Siversky Donets to advance their forces. Engineer forces and intelligence services have demonstrated true teamwork.
Інженери у розвідка спрацювали як єдина команда. Перші вирахували місця, де переправу робити. Найбільш логічно, а другі дронами і іншими методами пересвідчилися, що росіяни намагатимуться переправлятися саме тут.
Thanks to sufficient preparation, artillery knew exactly where to hit. Choosing the moment when Russians slowed down on both banks of the river, Ukrainians have struck a devastating blow.
Коли рештки ще нещодавно потужної бойової одиниці намагалися втекти, їх наздогнала ще й українська авіація, яка теж виявилася зовсім не знищеною.
As a result, in May's attempt to advance near Bilohorivka, Russians lost a few hundred soldiers and up to 150 armored carriers and tanks.
Все завдяки успішній взаємодії розвідки та артилерії, влучності українських бійців і допомозі західних партнерів новітньою технікою.
Ukrainians continue to defend their land. Despite being outnumbered with firepower, Ukrainian strikes are more skillful and precise. However, to win an artillery war against a 6 times greater army is nearly impossible. Ukraine needs heavy weapons.
Якби кількість техніки вдалося хай і не зрівняти, але хоча б звести до показника 1 до 2, то в окупантів не було б жодних шансів.
Ukraine fights for its freedom. Help us defend ourselves and the values of the free world. Join the side of freedom. Subscribe United 24 Media.